session. Our first item on the agenda is a discussion of tuition. And so I have asked for some numbers to be pulled on student services and where we were last year.
And all of
which
you
we
have
on a blue.
yes, sheet.
form.
This is actually this year's numbers.
Yeah,
So we are looking at and you'll also see it in the facilities plan too, if you want to compare to last year's numbers. But know that K through 8 non-residents, we are sitting at 106 that are non-resident transfers, and that doesn't include 99 employees' children.
It does 99?
There are not, yes, so there's 106, just
Plus
non-residents.
99 employees.
And then there are 99 employees. 9 through 12 non-residents, there are 403 non-resident transfers, and that doesn't include the 32 employee children at Houston High School. So you can see the next chart, and it's this blue sheet right here, if everybody's looking at it. The next chart that you can see is the money that the city gave us based on the property tax valuation. So you can see we were just over 2.5 million for this past year, divided by our number of students. So when you look at the TCA, which is at the bottom of how to calculate the maximum amount of tax that you could charge, you can see it would be $416 per student. Know that I do want some clarification, so we're going to talk about the number, that number may slide one way or the other, because the 6,016 was our ADM number, which is our average daily membership number. And so we know when we talk about ADA, that's going to be a little bit different. So I would need clarification, and we don't have that yet, on whether it would be the WFTE ADA, which is the weighted full-time equivalent. So know that when they look at how we divvy up the county portion of our funding, there's different evaluations for the types of students. So if there are CTE or special needs students, they count more. So I think last year our WFT ADA was just over 7,000 students approximately. So know that as we would go through this process, if the board decided to charge tuition, that would be, no, that's not the exact number that it would be. That's going to slide one way or the other. And with that, that's...
Well, we wouldn't want to get into dollars and cents that close anyway.
Yes, so it would be up for discussion for y'all.
One question I had was how many of the non-residents are in our academies?
The 403.
Do we know that?
Mr. Blaine can
About
pull
the
it.
403. Mr. Blaine, you're welcome to come sit at the table. You don't have to try to juggle paper and answer questions at the same time.
A large number is going to be the answer to
I
that
know,
question.
I just-
Yes, yes, so he can get you.
I think that's an important factor
do.
for us to think about too.
Because I think it affects the residents as far as
Right.
if we can continue.
And how many programming,
Yes, as far as
Right.
dual enrollment, AP.
exactly. Those higher end CTE classes. Okay. Are there other questions in the waiting?
Yeah, that would be my big question.
79 are not in an academy, are in the academy.
Out of 403?
Out of 403?
No, that can't be correct.
Write 79 down.
Okay,
That is not correct.
okay.
Those are new for this year.
New this year, okay, because I was thinking, wow, that
Yes,
doesn't sound
it's
right.
like, no.
Okay.
Plus 160.
That sounds better, plus 160.
So about 240-ish.
139, you were very close to 140.
239.
Oh,
Yes,
239,
239,
right, carry my one, sorry. Okay. So, roughly half, a little more. And we're sitting with not a lot of additional seats at the high school, right?
There,
100-ish,
19,
1932.
about 1940, yeah, Mr. Taylor was 9. I think we're close.
Capacity's what,
Capacity's
2100?
2,100, so I was thinking we were
Yeah.
pretty close to capacity at the high school. Middle school and Riverdale were at capacity.
Beyond.
Yeah, and then Forest Hill Elementary, we have 60 seats. And the other schools are at capacity or beyond. So,
Another question?
my question is, I know that community people are asking me, are we gonna charge tuition, shouldn't we charge tuition? I think it's important to have the facts on the table, how many seats we have available, and how much we could possibly make from tuition. And when I do the math, if we lose a few children, we've lost any income we have from tuition based on our county and state.
I don't see it, and I see that as, when we were going through all the transfer changes, we got multiple emails from parents who said, we would pay tuition, please let us come back, because they didn't make the cut.
Right.
But it, again, I get that, but what I'm saying is, people drive by other schools to go to our district
Right.
purposefully, $400, give or take. If that's gonna change their minds, then we have other questions we need to be asking. Because we're not, Oak Ridge, Maryville, let's compare. $400 is what we potentially could ask. Kingsport charges $1,400. Maryville charges $2,200. Oak Ridge charges
But that's what their city
$3,500.
gives them.
That's what their city gives them, absolutely. And I think we have talked about, we need more from our city.
Right.
And I feel like we need to be able to say, we have done everything we can to cover our bases here, to cover the operational funds that we have. And we can't do it, we need more from you. And this is one way of saying, we've covered that base.
I think Rebecca makes an excellent point. That if that $400 makes a difference to a third of those children, we've lost far more money.
If it makes a difference to a third of those children, we have to ask harder questions. We have to ask ourselves, why are they choosing to leave for $400 and maybe go to private school or choose,
Or maybe it's not to go to private school, maybe they can't afford the $400, but they want to give their child the best education possible. And so they transfer into our district to offer that to their children, whereas they couldn't afford to do that.
did Collierville see that happen? They didn't.
I think it's hard to compare. It's hard to compare, yeah, I feel like you're comparing apples to oranges.
It's a municipal district right next door to us. And they have not seen flight. If we were gonna see flight from Collierville, they would have come to us because we're the neighboring district. We didn't see large flight from Collierville into Germantown because they started charging tuition.
I think the other question I have is, we've already been asked by the city to consider city employees' children as we consider GMSD employee children. So I wonder, Mr. Glenn, do you know how many of these other students are city employee children?
At the high school.
Across K through 12?
I think he said,
That are out of,
That are from out of district?
Not in,
I
not
don't
in
have
the
any
city
idea what that
employees.
number would be.
Right. Just outside of the city of Germantown.
But city employees?
Couple minutes on that one. I wrote down a lot of numbers that you might ask that now.
Sorry, throw you a curveball there.
It's called discussion, which means we,
We can go all kinds of directions.
There is, I mean, there's always the option that we would say academies are tuition-free.
And if we do that, we need to be prepared for what growth that's gonna cause in academies, and we need to be prepared to provide what we say we offer by those academies, which is not always the case.
If they're free of tuition?
Right, I mean, if we have,
No, what, that,
if we have growth in the academies, we need to make sure we're providing what's being promised.
But
Does
they're
that
free
make
now.
sense?
not
why would that-
fiscally, the
Not
program,
fiscally, but
programmatically.
programmatically. That the Leadership Academy should offer what the Leadership Academy promises.
Right.
That the Honors Academy offers what the Honors Academy promises. That the Fine Arts Academy offers what the Fine Arts Academy promises.
So if somebody were accepted into them,
Right, if we see growth in those academies, we
Mhm.
need to be prepared for that growth.
right?
They, they don't.
I think we're talking about who we already have. How many?
But if we, 239,
It's very, very small.
how many?
6.
6 employee children?
It was small.
So very small, okay,
5 at Forest Hill and 1 at Riverdale.
okay.
Basically, hitting on everything that has already been said. I have only heard from people, and of course, as Fisher said, they were primarily, that is correct, elementary transfer, out-of-district people who, every single one of them said, I'd pay whatever. Because you know what, at the end of the day, it's a lot cheaper than me having to sell my home and try to get an apartment or a townhome or condo or a home in Germantown. We're not prepared to move, but we would certainly pay you, at the time, I think, kicking it around several months ago, $453. We would gladly pay you $453 today. And there was still no room, which I didn't, so that was, that was
Well, and I
their
think that's the
thought
other
process.
piece is,
Um,
do we really have room even next year to take any more, or even maybe the students we have now at that 106 non-residents through 6th through 8th grade?
You may be cutting.
We may be cutting again
Yeah,
come spring,
We will cut again.
But you're
Remember, we
gonna
let the
say,
8th graders,
You can come if you pay
Yeah.
tuition, but we don't.
but we don't have
But
space.
and I think that that
That's a
goes
good
back to
thing.
the community's request again and again and again that I continue to hear. And that's that for the future, I want to make sure that people know if there is room and you don't live in Germantown, we're happy to educate you and your family member. But you're going to pay this little difference that our city offsets as what we receive from them for the resident children. So that is something that's been expressed. And again, we're talking nominal, like we're not talking anything with a comma at this point. So yeah, you're right, we probably don't have the space even if we do have the tuition. But I think people are looking like, what are you doing? Because all they do hear on the news is what's going on next door. And they say, oh, well, Collierville's charging tuition, why are we charging tuition? Well, probably because Collierville maybe has more room in the end and we don't.
And they need to fill
Or not
it.
as many people are at, in the academy situation. But I think that goes back to the academies.
They have to fill it.
And making sure,
$400 sounds nominal unless you have multiple children in the district.
that's right.
I'm sorry.
And I think
And we have a lot of
talked
people
about
that have
before a cap of
children in the district
$1,000.
where one child of the group and the siblings were accepted into our schools this year, and younger siblings weren't necessarily included in that. We've had families split up as a result of our transfer policy change, but we knew that was gonna happen, and that goes back to, again, some of the things that go on with resident and non-resident families. These are hard things that they're experiencing. I'm just, covering back to what, I feel like I need to express what people have expressed to me during this discussion, and those have been the things. I'm gonna bring something up at the further business about kind of how we handled our first year with the transfer change, so, just in general, I think it's important to talk about it. I don't see it as a deterrent necessarily, so the argument about because we don't know, that's the whole thing. We don't know. We don't know how many people would leave. It might be 3 people, it could be 30 people. That's one of those things we have to decide. It could be none, that's right. There's a reason why I feel like people choose our academies, if that's their path into our high school. And, a lot
I
of the
think the
people.
other question for me is, the academies are important, it's important to have enough students to support having those teachers in those classes. It's also important to realize that we need those other 200 students at the high school
Yes.
who are not in academies. And
They pay for a lot of teachers' salaries.
they
and a lot
do,
of programs.
and a lot of programs. And they're not going to continue to come up through our program. So we're looking for fresh ninth graders now to come in and show up in our seats.
And that's a lot of times when
Which
you
is a
see that
lot of-
That's
transition
what Mr.
from middle
Manuel's
school
brought up
into
several
high school.
times.
Yeah,
How we get these people into our high school that weren't part of our
We're-
legacy younger and lower schools.
We're gonna find
Just-
ourselves recruiting harder and harder to get that 400 students.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, those that, we see that chunk that leave our eighth grade, they love us kindergarten through eighth grade, but everybody has, you know, this high school they're gonna go to for other reasons. And we've talked about that as a group before, how we identify that group. You know, otherwise, I refer to it as the brothers boy phenomenon, y'all heard me say that. But, you know, just because granddaddy went there, or, you know, so-and-so, I appreciate that because it's part of my family heritage. But at the same point, I wanna see how we can address that to try to keep these kids that we've educated and keep them and get them to Houston High School.
and on the other side of that is also, you know, having gone to church for a very long time in Cordova, I know a lot of kids who've gone to a certain point and had great educations where they were, but didn't wanna go to the next point, and that's where they're looking at a new opportunity, and they're having to make decisions between, do I try to apply to, GMSD or Carterville, or do I go to St. Benedict or whatever? And when you're looking at those options, you know, $400 compared to St. Benedict, or $400 compared to a little farther down the road and $400, you know, I just don't see it as a deterrent. I do not see that as a possibility as a deterrent. Now, if we were talking about Oak Ridge's 3,500, sure, that's a deterrent. I would sure love it to be that situation, so that we could say we don't need that because the city's got us $3,500 a student, but they're not doing that.
Okay, any other questions to put on the table for discussion?
I would love to know the impact it would have if we could have, even an insignificant loss of student charging tuition. Because again, $400 on the surface doesn't sound like much unless you have multiple children in a district. And, because it's mainly the high school, because we always, space really isn't a great argument, because we don't have to grant transfers. Based on, I mean, if we need the space. But for the high school, it has been our saving grace, having the academies and being able to bring these, the best and the brightest in, and the students that wanted to come and be a part of GMSD. So that's my greater concern, is what impact this is gonna have on the high school.
Well, my concern is that at most, we're looking at a $200,000 income stream. And you are possibly losing. Worthy discussion, worthy to the community to continue to give input and help us decide how to move forward. But I thought it was important just to get these numbers on the table now and start
And I do think it's
considering.
important, because I'm not sure everyone realizes that state law
Holds us
binds how
back.
much we can
Yes.
charge.
Right.
So, you know, a lot of the talk in the community that I've gotten is, well, you know, we charge $1,000.
It's worth it. Yeah, well, we can't. It's definitely
But we
worth
can
$1,000. It's
say
just
to-
not legal.
To address some of the concern that you have regarding families with multiple children, we can say, families with multiple children have a cap at 1,000, which I believe was
That
something we
was something
discussed
that we had
in
discussed
January.
previously.
So we can cap it. We can say you can up to this amount. We're not, our hands are not tied there.
Is it possible to have a scholarship program? Is that
Well, we would have to
something that-
follow, yeah, you would have to follow free and reduced procedures, so we would,
Okay.
That was the question.
yes.
Yeah, if there's free or
That's
free
what I
and
just
reduced,
wrote
it's still
down.
allowed.
We
Mhm.
could have
Mhm.
tuition for
Yes.
students that wanted to
Okay.
continue, and when do you start? Do you start this with new, or do you start with students that are gonna be seniors? That was something.
Those would all be
Those would
points
all
of
be
discussion.
points of discussion, yeah.
Don't start too much, those grandfathers again.
Okay,
I like that.
we're gonna move to the next item on our agenda. Thank you all. The annual review revision of policies after first reading begins with Ms. Stratton.
Thank you, Mr. Bland.
We just have two minor tweaks to policy 5.500, the discrimination and harassment of employees. We wanted to make sure that the policy clearly stated who the district employee complaint managers were if an employee did need to make a report. So we have included the district employee complaint managers as being the human resources supervisor and/or the executive director of human resources.
Where is that?
It's on the back.
It's on the back page, okay. Sorry.
Mhm.
No,
It's like
so
a-
the other ones, we're gonna have
It's very.
order.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
My only question was, what prompted the change?
We just wanted to, we were looking at at all of our policies, and we just wanted to make sure that we were consistent, especially between this discrimination, harassment of employees, and then the complaints and grievances. So
But, I mean, I was just curious as to why we went from federal law to Canadian.
to the district complaint managers. Just so it was easier for our employees to understand.
So who is that person?
Oh, that,
To go
so.
to.
Clarity.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
What's, so, that being general, is there a possible way you could give an example? No, sorry. That explains why I was like, that doesn't make any sense. First page, draft and medical care is the first thing I'm
I
saying.
think it might be just a little clearer if you just added, like, these rights are concurrent to any rights granted under any other board policy or under Tennessee law. I don't want anyone to get in a situation where someone says, I followed this policy, but nobody told me that I also had Teacher Tenure Act rights, or I had Title IX, or Tennessee Human Rights Act, you know, do the whole alphabet. Just to let them know, don't stop at this page, look at the whole picture.
Sure. If you want to say that slowly, Ms. Vijaya will write that down for you.
Definitely.
And add it to the,
Where did you want it added?
I think you could just put it right before you put the name of the district employee complaint managers.
Under the discrimination and harassment of employees policy.
After line 9?
So line 9, between 9 and 10?
You would
Nine and
begin
10, exactly.
Okay.
so will you repeat, or are you writing it right now?
These rights are concurrent to any other rights granted elsewhere, either by board policy,
Why is it manual, to be squared?
Either?
by board policy
Here's the thing.
or Tennessee and federal law.
Tennessee and federal.
That'll pick up Title IX, that gives you all
Did you say
teacher
by board
tenure.
policy or Tennessee and federal law?
Yes.
These rights are concurrent to any other rights granted elsewhere, either by board policy or Tennessee and federal law.
Probably very redundant
Doesn't
and
hurt.
bootstrapped.
Probably should say or federal law rather than and federal law.
Tennessee
Or-
and federal.
Tennessee or federal law.
Okay.
No, she said. Yeah, you can say you can say board policy or Tennessee and or federal law.
And
And or,
or.
there we go.
My only question was, is it structurally a problem for it not to come up to the director of schools or to the superintendent anymore as an option? If people felt like they were being discriminated against, for it to come to HR or HR rather than have a different workaround?
So in the complaints and grievance policy,
Mhm.
If they are not satisfied with
With your
HR's
response.
decision, then they're able to go to the deputy superintendent, then to, the superintendent. So
Okay.
there is another
Another
workaround.
route, okay. But if their concern really was with you, or with human, would they immediately go then
They have to go to the
to
deputy
deputy
superintendent.
superintendent? Okay.
What, in which one?
In the complaints and grievances.
Sorry, we're,
Oh,
no,
okay, so.
But that's,
we're not to that one yet.
right,
We
but,
are, But that was the question.
I didn't see that.
so if I,
That's where I was first.
if I felt I was being harassed, but I was being harassed by HR, then
If Alyssa was harassing just an employee, who should we go to?
I always try to imagine I'm not the person sitting in the seat.
I think that's great.
So
You could
Who
leave
would
in,
I
you could leave in,
go to,
I think it says you can choose.
if you don't like the decision, you can go to the deputy superintendent.
And then, so that we do have two complaint managers too, so if someone felt that I was harassing them, they
Right.
could go to the other complaint manager.
Okay. I just try to separate people who are complaint receivers, because
Do you want director of schools there or just the
I
deputy superintendent?
I just asked the question.
And then, one other thing too, then, that you and I have discussed is, Mr. Manuel's made sure that the staff has appropriate training, that a lot of times, this particular complaint can cross over into Title IX issues. I sound like I'm stuck on that issue.
No,
I'm
it
not
just
sure.
happens
No,
to
I'm not.
apply to a lot
But
of things.
that HR is very attuned to the fact of when they have concurrent investigations or at least concurrent verifications, and that has been very much taken into account and handled.
Do you want to add the same to the 5.5012?
I think this one is okay because you've got all the lists in here on the complaint and
back.
grievance. When you've got all the listing in here and it
Okay.
is the board policy. And then you've also got the step over provision, like around on lines 11 and 12.
Okay.
You know, the person you're irritated with is your immediate supervisor, job
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I
Is
will
there
add
any other concerns about 5.500?
No.
And then we'll go to 5.501.
So the changes that we made to this policy, again, we just, were being consistent with the, district employee complaint manager. And we wanted to make sure that we identified who they were in this policy as well.
So in this policy, the deputy superintendent's not in the
It just says
It refers to the superintendent.
superintendent.
So for consistency's sake, that's my question. If it's now gonna be the deputy superintendent, then would it not be, should we not also have the deputy superintendent being written decision within 5 days?
We should.
I mean, if we're
And then
taking
they
it,
can
So
appeal
that's
it.
on page 2 on line 12.
and that's.
So that would be
two
deputy?
different places.
And 24.
And 22.
22
No,
also?
well,
Or what?
no, that's
No,
actually the
that's
superintendent, okay.
So line 12 and line 24.
No, I think 24 needs to stay superintendent.
Superintendent.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
superintendent, that's not
Yeah.
deputy.
Okay. Yeah,
Just under decision and appeal, just needs to have.
line 12.
Okay. Thank you.
The
harassment,
Oh,
he was
sorry.
the superintendent.
Yep.
Hey,
We're still gonna let him,
it all comes to me anyway.
Okay.
But it makes perfect sense to have, and have it so plainly placed and policy that
Right.
there's no question who to contact. I think
Right.
kudos on that.
Okay, so can you give an example that would kind of describe this before and this kind of with the changes, so just so I understand? With, we're gonna appoint the 2 different complaint managers, and then, let's say somebody has an issue with somebody in their department, whether it's subordinate supervisor or vice versa, either way, and they plead their case to this person. What happens after that, as far as this goes?
So-
If that person says, that's not true, that's not how it happened, then is that a subsequent,
So
I guess, policy, or?
when I look at this policy, I think there are 2 types of, there's a complaint and a grievance as far as like, hey, I'm having a conflict with a coworker.
Mhm.
And that is to be handled, at the lowest level
Right.
supervisory position. And then, if there is a allegation of discrimination or harassment, that's when it comes to the complaint manager. And so they will do an investigation, and then they will file a report, to determine whether or not the allegation was true. And then they will report that to the deputy superintendent as well as the person that files the report. If the person making the claim of the allegation, doesn't agree with that, then they're able to go back to the deputy superintendent. So we're not the
So
final
then they
say.
get out of that loop altogether. So, hypothetically, like we were just kinda saying, so what if the, allegation is to that person who happens to oversee this process? Then what happens?
It
You're
would
dealing
come
with
to me,
deputy versus,
yes.
okay, or vice versa?
Yes.
I mean, depending on how it shakes out.
Right.
Okay.
All right, thank you. There were no changes advised for operations or for finance, so we move to Mr. Bland.
What did you plus of these two? Could be easy.
Okay.
Okay, yes, sure. You can income.
The first one is 6.200. Due to recent change in law, when a student is out on a school-sponsored field trip, they're now covered, credit instead of excuse absence. So we just struck that out. The next one is 6.415. Again, due to recent change in law, each school must now have an AED. Previously, it was junior high or high school, so now we all have them. So we struck the line about the junior high or senior high in the training. We added the new language to include all schools and the training for all schools.
Okay, so that was 2
And
different
then on
policies.
Yep.
Okay, so the military
Six
addition.
point two oh oh,
No, okay.
The military.
6.200, military, so, again, like everything we do with the change in law, you could create a separate military policy. So we removed it previously. After talking to Manuel, we would prefer not to create a separate new policy, so we put it back into 6.200, which is what it originally.
about absences.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
that makes sense. So on the 6.415, now that all schools will have the AED, the difference between what was struck and what was kept, it talks about the junior and senior high students having training in CPR and AED. I mean, that's continuing, is it not?
So, yes, but now all students have to receive the training. So if you
even elementary ed students are getting CPR training?
Just
The faculty
Right,
receive the
but,
training.
but in the struct part, it says junior or senior high students are required to receive training in the use of CPR and AED skills.
So,
So that was I was wondering, because I knew that my freshman was CPR certified through PE, so is that continuing?
that will continue there, Mr. Fisher has it set up for every 2 years.
Okay,
So that's gonna continue. They will continue to receive the CPR person training.
okay, so
Okay,
that's
so
not
this says,
going to be
though-
required.
Because I thought that even elementary students would be made aware of how to use an AED, because it
That's the way it
says
reads
schools
to me,
shall
too.
conduct CPR and AED drills so that students are aware of the steps that must be taken.
Yeah, that's
They
my
will,
question.
they receive
Okay.
live training,
Right.
at the schools. So
Okay.
they're included in this as well, as
Mhm.
well as.
All ages or just, so we've got kindergartners learning how to use an AED?
I'm not sure how the training looks. I'm not
It's
sure
easy
if
enough.
Well, I know, I'm just imagining my 5-year-old child learning how to use an AED.
They should at least learn to back away and not touch the
Right.
person.
Absolutely, oh, I don't disagree, but,
And I know the ones that we have, they are voice guided,
Mm-hmm.
if that helps at all. I mean, it tells
Yeah.
them exactly what to do. And
where to put everything, yeah, I'm just,
And there will always be, I mean, with different instances where elementary
No.
school's not gonna have the adults, everybody together,
Right.
but they're gonna be there, and adults something by themselves.
I think I'm
Who's
more worried
gonna
about
run
the
the-
way it's worded.
I'm concerned about who's gonna run the drill,
Mr. Fisher coordinates with the principals.
but who's gonna know what the kindergartners should learn about an AED?
That part, yeah, I can get some
Okay.
clarification.
That'd be
do we
much.
have any specific instructions coming from the state as to how much they're
How
supposed
the
to do?
training looks.
Probably not, they just decided it would be a good idea.
Be a great idea for everybody to be trained.
Take more time out of your instructional day and teach your child how to do an AED, even though the kindergarten can't read yet.
I don't think it needs to be in policy how it's conducted, but I do think that we need to be really careful how we roll that out with
Yes.
parents and with kids and make sure we know what we're supposed to
I
do.
think the only guidance.
That makes me very nervous to,
The only guidance that we receive from the state is that it's a live drill.
okay.
And it's not something that you tell them, it's something that you actually.
You surprise them.
It's a
Yeah.
demonstration.
Okay.
Still not super
Well,
thrilled
like the
about that.
Kiwanis, I think have donated most of our.
We got, first time for our legislative agenda, or second, I don't know. It's okay. Yes.
I mean, there'd be less afraid of something.
Oh, certainly, certainly. I mean, going through it in a drill isn't a problem. I just,
Like I said, to me,
it
it's just the
sounds
way
like
it's
the
worded.
kids are gonna learn how to do
And that
CPR
we're
and
expecting them
AED.
to do it, like that's gonna be.
That's what it sounds like.
But a live
So-
drill sounds a little more intimidating to me than it does if you are walking them through, this is what would happen.
Well, you'd have to do that the first time.
You'd
That-
have to.
Well, I know that, but that's not what this says.
Well, we look forward to more information.
That's
Yeah.
right. Request for guidance.
Okay, and 6.416.
416, that is the,
Student accident
Schools
report.
nurse.
accident, this only says a set of the principal's office with,
The nurse.
I'm assuming that that's a nice, secure,
It is.
Place.
Yes, we have file cabinets for them all. The only reports that we receive, we receive the 911 reports. If they have to call 911, they immediately fax that information to Mr. Fisher.
Okay, thank you.
There was one in the 6.422 that said no revision. That's actually one that Mrs. Law recommended for removal. It's not a policy that we're required to have. No other municipal district has.
Psychological and social services?
Psychological and social services.
It's a policy that it's kind of outdated and we don't need it. We don't need it to, it's not a required policy.
Hold on, can we look at that?
I was gonna say, can we do next time?
Let's
Please?
do that.
Yeah,
let's put it on the
I wanna really look at it.
And it's one number 6.422
Yeah,
and 6.414.
6 dot, write it down.
414 is guidance and school counseling, and 6.422 is
422. Say the other one again. 6.414. Okay, that wasn't even in this list. Okay.
So we'll have those on the agenda.
No, on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Bland. Mr. Jones? Fiscal year miscellaneous budget amendments, number 7 and number 8.
We have two, first with number 7. This is appropriating the restricted reserves for the TV studio program for equipment. This is the balance on hand at June 30, 2019.
These are funds that we carried over from last year.
Yes.
That we're gonna appropriate them to get funded.
So as you know, they receive PEG funding through those individuals that have cable bills. There's a portion that goes to the public access television.
Very
Do we
good.
know how they plan to use those funds, or is there something in the pipeline, or are they just building up for
Mr.
something at some
Manning
point?
will work with, I guess, our new assistant superintendent and possibly Ms. Crowder.
Okay.
And budget amendment 8.
And number 8 is appropriating the funds for our 2019-20 Safe Schools and School Safety Grants for various equipment purchases as well as security enhancements across the district. And Mr. Bland is available if you have more detail or need more detail.
Okay, so,
Those first two, those are the things that we were anticipating.
Mhm.
Okay.
and these are the grants that were referred to by this summer, this
Mhm.
previous meeting that we
Yes.
need to apply for.
Right.
But they're not applied to, they cannot be applied to
Previous
these,
capital funds.
Dogwood
Correct.
entrance
Correct.
that we needed the funds for originally. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yes, and nor is the amount comparable to,
No,
yeah.
nor is the amount comparable to what it would cost to do what we need to do for
Yes,
Dogwood.
ma'am. These are much smaller in nature.
Does this need to be in consent, or does this need to be discussed in a business action? I don't think we have a problem approving it, I just wonder if it needs to be
Where?
openly discussed.
It is
I'm
anyone's purview to remove it from the
I'm-
consent agenda.
I'm asking for input on what people's thoughts might be. Because I do believe that there was a reason we did not receive the funding, because people were led to believe there was grant money out there for us to pay for these things for the Dogwood.
So.
Is there
this is-
additional funding coming?
For
This is a state
fiscal-
grant. This isn't the grant that we will work in
Right.
conjunction with the city.
Okay, so was that one
Two
still
grants.
pending?
We haven't heard anything on that grant.
And how much would that be?
I think the total was, you can receive up to 500,000.
Okay.
The number that we asked for was in the 400s.
Okay, and that is for the Dogwood entrance. And what would that go to?
That was for the Invisalign software.
That was for the software.
Yes.
Right, and it could only be used for the
It can only
software
use- It can only be used for what you earmarked it for when you applied.
when you apply for the grant, but they couldn't do capital for that, right? That was not an option.
That particular one,
That
no.
particular grant, there was no
It-
capital option.
Yeah.
We never discussed the Dogwood entrance.
And the Dogwood entrance, and remember, this was done before we had the discussions of the Dogwood entrance when they were submitting the grant proposals.
Yeah,
So
that
they'd already been-
proposal was before.
Yes, they had,
before.
yes.
The
that
one that they
originally had the
discussed about
discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
potentially could fund that they would try to reimburse us for and help us write the grant request for was one that would be for next fiscal year, which is why I got pushed back.
No. What now?
The grant, not this grant, the grant that could be applied towards capital improvements or security measures hasn't occurred yet, is my understanding.
We don't know that it exists.
Well, that's true. I mean, we know it exists. We don't know that
It
we've
doesn't exist, is the point.
done anything with it.
There's
that's
no
not-
place to apply for
There's
it.
no right.
There is no grant for capital.
Either way, it was gonna be for next year anyway, but this is not.
This
for-
is, this is,
for
this is
this
the
year.
local state grant
Right,
that was,
this is, I
not
know
that
that.
other one. Yeah.
But I'm saying like, this is current,
Right.
expenses. So to that point, I do think we need to discuss it publicly. about where those other funds may come from, because that was exactly what we were told when we were, talking about needs, and we're gonna talk about that in this, it's gonna come up in here anyway.
Yeah,
So
it's in
it's
there.
gonna, right,
Yep.
so
So
is that,
Okay.
do we
We're
need to,
gonna-
we'll talk
Alright.
about it then, obviously.
if we're gonna talk about it then we may not need to. talk
We
about
have
it.
10 minutes left to talk about it.
Okay, then let's go.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Kathy?
Mr. Kathy? Can you present a 95-page report in 10 minutes?
If anybody can,
Yes, ma'am, I can do it. I think with our time, I have a couple of things that I wanted to highlight and go over, but I think I just want to start, I'm sure you guys are taking notes and look over the plan, so I think I'd just like to dive right in and start with your questions, concerns, or what you would like to discuss.
Instead of presenting.
In regards to the plan.
And I'm sort of, I don't know if you have an answer, because we have quite a list, as we always do.
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us how much money we're gonna have to accomplish that? And I know sometimes we don't have, based on county commission, et cetera, but is there, the reason I'm asking is, I wanna know what we can pay for, because we wanna have a joint meeting with the city to discuss our other needs. So I'm sort of curious what we can pay for so that we know what to ask the city for.
I will start there, and go through the project list that's on page 51. I think that's probably a good starting point. So the Houston Middle School addition is the first item on the list. We've got a cost estimate there of $8 million. $5 million of that the city has agreed to fund. $3 million of that would come from Germantown Municipal School District reserves, which have already been pulled and budgeted. The Houston High Athletic Field House, which is $4 million of that number, as you guys know, that's a four-legged stool. That's already underway. The funding is us, the city, one very generous private donor, and then multiple other smaller private donors. After that,
And just to clarify, on the athletic field house, the district's commitment to that, we're talking about that 200,000 over a 5-year period that we're paying for that. So that's that's not all that funding up front. Yes, even though the project is gonna take place, it has a slower.
Slower pay.
after that, here's what we do know. The city has agreed to fund $500,000 additional dollars for security improvements, which we could use as part of that Houston Middle School addition or for dogwood. But there's $500,000 coming just for security improvements that we can use for capital. That ends the city's funding and what they've agreed to for this year. They've agreed to $5 million for the middle school addition. They've agreed to $500,000 for security improvements and $200,000 per year for the next several years for the field house. This is what we have. So that's $5.7 million of city funds and commitments. We know that the Shelby County Commission, we've made great strides with them, and we are receiving 80% of their dollars. That's in the plan, where we are going to receive $451,000 monthly, which is 80% of their allocation towards us. So that's money that we can depend on, that we're actually going to receive, with the caveat that if Shelby County Schools does not spend 80%, we have to give back what is not spent by Shelby County Schools. So I say that with the caveat because I don't want anyone to say we never, if these dollars are not spent by Shelby County Schools, even though we have received them, they are going to come back after them if Shelby County Schools doesn't spend. Now, if they spend their full 100% allocation, then we will get the remaining 20%. But what we know and what we are planning for right now is $4.5 million roughly coming in from the Shelby County Commission.
However, Shelby County does schools, so I know that is a concern. That's why we're doing just the 80%, or the CFO for Shelby County government thought it was wise to do that 80%. But as you know, there are several large projects happening in Shelby County schools that we believe they're gonna be able to spend that funding, so there should be a solid stream to at least hit that 80% mark. Not guaranteeing it, but the fact that we've got Alcee Elementary going up, there's some positive steps happening in Shelby County schools to spend their capital dollars.
So $5.7 million coming from the city, at least $4.5 million coming from the Shelby County Commission, gets us to around $10 million. You see there's $18,700,000 of projects there. The rest would come from the Germantown School District's general fund if we were to complete all of these projects. Yes, ma'am. And I always want to throw the caveat on there, assuming that these bid.
Historically speaking.
don't assume that.
Yes,
We
don't
will not
assume that.
assume that because last year that was not the case. So I hope I helped answer that for the commission.
Thank you.
The 1.2 million for the softball field,
questions about that.
Lots of
So
questions
for us,
about that.
it's something that
Well,
we've
what is-
talked
why
about.
do you need that much?
How we would use it and what we would want to do is really dependent upon, as you know, what happens with this whole land exchange conversation that we've been having. So if we were able to get a field that is behind Houston High School's campus, we wouldn't have to make investments in lights and turf. There's some fencing upgrades that we'd have to do, but we want to provide comparable services. So when we talk about a indoor turf room / locker room for that girls' team, that's what we would talk about for that building, that facility. If, like Ms. Ove, we talked about having those backup plans. If we're not doing that, then we're talking about having to take a piece of land and you're having to put in lighting, you're having to put in fencing, and then it's going to be, the project looks different depending on the outcome of
So what
our
is-
discussions. It's a placeholder.
Okay, that was my question.
It's just a
It's a
placeholder.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's something that we know we're going to make investments one way or the other. And that's not the end of our investments in that facility and project.
And that's what you explained at the
Yes.
Financial Advisory Commission meeting, but people in the community who have gotten wind of, the costs associated with that potential project have asked a lot, like, well, what's the $1.2 million for? And I'm like, well, we could spend nothing.
expensive.
Yes.
It's like, or we could,
And think about minimally, if you think about the size of the building that our field house is at the high school, and that's a $4 million project. 1.2 doesn't go as far as you would think it would, especially if you're building locker room, bathrooms, facilities.
When did y'all meet to do that?
Ms. Landers?
Exact date, it was in
Do you-
September, I think. Ms. Landers was the board person on the committee, I believe it was this September.
September?
Yes, ma'am.
How often do y'all change out a parent community member?
That committee has looked pretty
Identical?
Yes,
identical or
similar.
similar to the same committee it has been for the past 5 or 6 years, I think.
No, well, we've added a
Now,
couple.
we have added some, but I think I know where you're going with that question.
who
It's been a very
selects
simple committee.
the
It has
committee?
We just choose. For the most part, it's someone who's got a connection to the programs or projects. So for representation from the high school, we have Coach Charlie Leonard, who's the basketball coach at the high school, who helps represent. Of course, we have
And
all of the
added Coach
cabinet
Leonard
members.
Because he was an assistant athletic director at LSU, so he has
He has the
experience in
vision.
facility planning and vision and doing the work.
Well, I
of
wasn't
that
asking
nature.
specifically about him, I meant the process in general of selecting, like Ms. Landers, or how people in your cabinet got on, or who all from everywhere,
Well-
like, this is my first time.
Yeah,
I saw the
so-
list of people, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, so how did they get chosen?
So for us, this is an administrative function. We don't have to have a committee. It's just, I think it's good to hear
I
voices.
think it's really important that
I
you
think-
do, though.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think it's good to hear voices, so that's why we have somebody representing each department and each of the groups or projects. And usually we have, like I said, we have board representation. And
So
we
you
try-
chose Ms. Landers? Or
I
Mr.
think so.
Kathy?
I think we talked about, yes, that
Okay.
Ms. Landers had served in this functions when we were talking about the design of
Mm-hmm.
Forest Elementary School, so we thought it was a natural transition. Just asked if she'd be willing to.
And parents who are willing to serve, what is the process for them?
There hasn't been one. Now, we can certainly look at changing, opening. I think your questions well received and well taken. I would say that the members of this committee have been with us since the beginning, and their input has been good and valuable
Oh,
through the
I'm
process.
sure. They're wonderful.
No, it's not
wonderful
about
people.
who was
It's
on
about
it, it's just kind of about like how,
Lisa.
Lisa
right,
Parker.
like how
Lisa
that
has been the
process
consistent
goes, truly, because I
process.
don't know, that's what I was asking.
I just think sometimes
Ms. Landers is
when it's
clearly
the same
qualified to
voices
be on
at the
it.
table,
That's not the point.
it's always good to change things up, get some, just like, I'm sure Ms. Landers brought a different voice than Ms. Parker's voice.
Oh, yeah.
Not that either one is,
They're both great.
but they're both great. I just think that when you have two, particularly that are closely associated personally, that maybe we need to change that applicationally. So,
I think it's like the husband and wife.
their husband and wife,
Yeah.
those are two, they come from the same family, so may have similar concerns.
I don't think you would be.
I'm glad you were on it.
You were able to do that.
Okay. Other questions about the plan? Mr. Kathy? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Further business.
So y'all touched it with the BOE Connect, as long as we get that training, because
Not working. Well-
not loving on this one.
No.
This
The BOE Connect.
I don't care
Okay.
for it, and I've been working
There
with
being
it.
no further
Hold on,
business.
further business, as I mentioned earlier, is there a way, and it wouldn't happen tonight or this month even, but as we move ahead, to look back at how we implemented the new transfer policy, how it was, kind of worked, and see, I know we recently changed the date, for instance, on notification, and a policy change last month. And I just wanna make sure that maybe we go over, like, kind of like what really worked well, maybe what we could do better on, and just kind of identify that process internally. And I'm not sure where that would occur, but I've heard enough from people who would have liked better communication or, I guess, timely response and things like that, that I feel like it's something that at least needs to be attended to. But specific to that, because it was our first time, really having to deal with that quantity.
Having that quantity of.
And major change. Makes sense to me.
Is that an internal?
I'm not, that's what I'm kind of
Calendar
asking, because
or a-
It's something
That's-
we can talk with our
We can do a
student
debrief.
services department, but once again, that gets into administrative.
Right.
right, but that's why I'm just I'm letting you know that these things have been expressed, and that if this is not something from a policy
Facilities.
standpoint, it gets into your,
Perspective,
it
yeah.
gets into your, out of my area and into your area, just what that is, and just letting you know in this open forum that that was expressed, so whatever I can do to,
Might
go,
be
here
good
you
just to
go,
do a
or
debrief
if we need to
with
talk
the-
about it, I'm happy to
for
do
you.
that too.
Okay.
By the way, there was no financial report that I
No.
That was attached.
There is not a
Yes.
financial report. It's too early in the month. It's not attached. There won't be a
Yes.
report
Oh,
meeting.
more further business.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we're 7 days
I
in.
was wondering, I had the same problem, and I thought it was BOE Connect.
No, it wasn't one.
More further business?
Yes.
You have 1 minute.
I've reached out to Chairman Litter and Superintendent Manuel about the future dates, since we have our new home that we're gonna be in, that's so
Yes.
wonderful.
We are looking again at
Alternative.
BMA,
Okay,
BOE, because BMA wasn't up when we set BOE.
got it.
So we will look again, but several of them were because of holidays
Sure.
and
So there
trying
may
to
be
work
some we
around. So
can't
it may be
avoid
some
that
Right.
we
we're gonna
end
try.
up moving
Yes,
to a Tuesday or a Thursday or just having
Not
to be the
all
same.
of them, but yes.
Yeah.
But
In the previous years, we have met with the legislators, in October, November, before you head back into session.
Okay.
Superintendent, whatever board members could attend, are we planning on doing a negotiation?
You said that was a joint project with the TLN reps, so that may be something that you want to reach out to them. I know that Arlington hosted the past couple of years. Are you talking about the breakfast that we have, or just individually, the small group?
they actually
We
get
met,
together.
Yes.
we met with Mark White a
I
couple of
remember.
years ago, but last year we
Last
didn't
year,
meet with
did
him
you?
at
When I
all.
looked in the notes from last year, there wasn't.
So that's, I just didn't, I'm just throwing it out if we're interested in doing that.
And we may want to consider offering to host a breakfast if Arlington is not wanting to do that.
In January.
Yes.
If that's the
Typically done in
case, we
January.
talked about doing it, this past spring. I felt like there was some discussion about us trying to host a breakfast.
We would love to host
Yes.
again.
So,
If you want to reach out to other TLNs.
and that was,
Okay.
yeah, we, if we can host, or if she wants to host.
If we can
We can
host.
host.
Okay, yeah.
At the very least, I think it would be great to meet with, Mark White before the session starts.
I think we're,
Agreed.
as with everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Like have breakfast with them.
We had breakfast, we met Kevin Vaughn.
Well, I mean, we invite everyone, right?
No, we met
No, this is
individually.
Individuals.
Oh, okay, you're not talking about the breakfast anymore.
No, no,
We're
no.
back to the individual
Like
meeting.
individual
Individually,
before they
we
go
have
back.
one-on-one with our legislators before they go back to
Before.
session, so that we can just express our concern.
Basically what we do in the spring, but do it before they go back. Just us.
Yes. I mean, I'm not saying we have to do it, I'm just saying it's.
No, I think that. Oh, I'm gonna talk
Okay.
about that in just a minute.
There being no further business of the work session, this work session stands adjourned. We will begin in 4 minutes. This meeting of the Board of Education is now in session, in order. Let us pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. I've asked Ms. Fisher to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. We move to the agenda for the evening. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Oaf and seconded by Ms. Landers. Is there any discussion? Ms. Supermani, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Landers?
Yes.
Ms. Griffith?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Chairman Luther?
Yes.
Thank you.
Before we move to recognition and awards, I would let you know that we do have a section of our meeting called Citizens to be Heard, and if you are here and wish to be heard, there is a form to be filled out on the sign-in table at the entrance just outside the chambers. If you would get one of those and fill it out and turn it into the board secretary, Ms. Subramani, then you will be prepared when it comes time for the citizens to be heard. So now it is time for recognitions and awards.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. October 21st through 25th is American Safe Schools Week. The Germantown Municipal School District has a tremendous amount of respect and appreciation for all of our police officers and the challenge they face on a daily basis. We would like to express our gratitude to all police officers for your service. In short, we know it is not an easy job, and we thank you. However, tonight, we are here to honor and recognize a specific group of officers. The mission of the Germantown Police Department is to maintain a peaceful and orderly environment that ensures protection of life and property through equitable enforcement of laws, rapid response, and community education. We would like to take this opportunity to recognize and honor a group of people who go above and beyond in living that mission every day while also doing so much more, our school resource officers. These officers come to work every day as a part of the Germantown Municipal School District family. Each one of these officers would, without hesitation, put their life on the line to protect our most precious resource, our children. We have heard from so many students, parents, staff, and other stakeholders that it makes everyone feel so much more secure knowing these officers are in our schools every day, honoring, serving, and protecting. But our SROs are so much more than that. They are our partners. They are role models for our children in every way. They work hand in hand with our school and district administration on a daily basis. They direct traffic when there is a need. They are educators as well, working with our students and faculty in the classroom. They help with bulletin boards. They mentor. They act as counselor and guide to students and parents alike. They assist with moving furniture when we are doing summer projects. They stay on the phone with district administration, sometimes until 1 o'clock in the morning when there's a situation in the community that may have a nexus to the schoolhouse. They assist with creating our district emergency plans. They help by making facilities recommendations, like creating our like our door numbering system to help with response time in the event there is a crisis. And the list goes on, it's too numerous to list. Even when enforcing the law, they practice kindness, professionalism, and restraint. The Germantown Municipal School District is not only safer because of you, we are better because of you. Tonight, we want you to know you are appreciated. Tonight, we honor you and we thank you for your service, for your partnership, and for being a member of our family. And let's give these folks a round of applause. And if you would, come on up to be recognized individually, please.
And I will clarify that we do have an SRO in every single one of our schools. Some couldn't be here this evening. And also, we have a lieutenant who also supervises those and really helps the district office and administration when we have challenges and issues. So just know that they're more than just the three that are here tonight.
We now move to reports with our TLN update from Ms. Griffith.
Good evening. House Education Committee meets this week to discuss Department of Education update on assessments and the recent award to Pearson as our state testing provider. We are optimistic, but we shall see. They will also be discussing the intentional focus our state is taking on literacy for the early grades, and that, I believe, actually does include a little bit of pre-K going up through our, what we call elementary school age. Governor Lee has been very busy making appointments to many commissions and boards. He has selected the members of the newly established Charter School Commission, which is made up of representatives from all parts of the state. I have listed them in my report, but I will make a special mention of one particular local appointee, and that's Germantown High School alumni, Mr. Terrence Patterson. This commission will ultimately take over the responsibility from the state board in approving charter school applications. As we know, that was something that has changed recently as far as statute, and we, the local agency, will still have some ability, if it should ever come to that, to be an appeals process. Also, 3 appointments to the State Board of Education were also made. Lillian Hartgrove, Larry Jensen, and Nate Moreau, one of which is a local representative as well. The ESA legislation is being fast-tracked to take effect in the upcoming 2021 school year. However, testing accountability and progress measurements continue to be the sticking point in the language of the rules as written. Potential private schools need to know which assessments will be required of them to decide whether or not they want to accept these savings accounts. The current language also does not specify what would be used to measure progress at a private school if they should decide. The recent rulemaking hearing on ESA legislation was held in Nashville last week, and only two speakers presenting. Representative Gloria Johnson, who posed many of the same questions that our school district and board have over the past several months. And also another guest spoke requesting paper applications be made available and in multiple languages. One of the primary things that's being discussed is making it easy for families who may or may not have access to the internet. We do have until October 14th, a week from today, to provide written feedback to the State Department of Education and the State Board of Education. And I do intend to seek input from the board and so that we can do that. The final date for the Board of Education to discern the rules for this piece of legislation is fast approaching November 1st, and there are a lot of questions yet to be answered. So I am curious, since the fast tracking by the governor is really a strong push, I think a lot of folks are having a hard time getting on board with some of the language because it is very gray, which may pose some hindrance or lack of interest by some of the people that they're pursuing. So I think that's interesting. Sometimes haste makes waste.
Thank you, Ms. Griffith. The chairman's report this evening constitutes that the school board has had the opportunity to attend many events in our schools in the last month. Walk to school events, a coffee at Dogwood, Farmington open house. On the 27th of September, the board met to reflect on community and stakeholder input into the new strategic plan for GMSD, and we're really excited about the goals that we have set, and we look forward to establishing community and stakeholder input groups to begin reflecting and researching strategies for meeting those goals. And so I think everyone in the community will be really excited, and I think GMSD will be better for our new strategic plan as we move forward. I personally want to thank Vice Chair Amy O for attending the TSBA Board Chairman training in my absence last week. And as the first 9 weeks of school comes to a close, we wish our faculty, staff, students, and families a refreshing and renewing fall break. It's October 14th through 18th, and we look forward to you returning, eager to continue to learn and grow. And with that, I will ask for the financial report from Mr. Jones.
Just to let you know, we're still closing out the books for September, just now receiving information for those reports, some of that today. So we will email those to you in the next few days.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And the superintendent's report.
For the superintendent's report, I thought it was important for Mr. Cathy to share some key slides from our facilities strategic plan that we looked at during our work session so that the public can be aware. So, Mr. Cathy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The master facility plan for the board and the public. This is a 52-page document. It's available on our website every year. It will be made available on the website again this year. The plan has been updated, and we are just going to hit a few of the highlights in the plan. Again, this is not all encompassing. We're just hitting the big items. The first slide that you see here is our historical resident enrollment. Since we became a district in 2014 and 15 to present, obviously the big trend that you see there is when we began as a district, we had 4,218 resident Germantown students. And in 2019, 2020, we have grown to 5,393 students. That is growth of 1,175 students in 5 years. So you have seen that, yes, we have grown, and as we have grown, we have reduced the number of non-resident transfer students attending our schools. When the district began in 2014, 2015, we had a total of 1,450 transfer non-resident students. That number this year in 2019 and 2020 has been reduced down to 623, and if you look at the trend through the years, that number has been steadily reduced. So that's strategic, and as we continue to see resident growth, we have continued to reduce transfers, and we will stay with that strategy moving forward. The last page, or next to last page of the plan, is projects that we would like to complete in this fiscal year. So Houston Middle School addition, if you look through the plan, you see that we're roughly 28 students over capacity at Houston Middle School. So we are looking to do an addition at that school. The Houston High Athletic Fieldhouse is actually broken ground, and it's exciting. There's block coming out of the ground now. So that project is underway as we speak. The Dogwood ADA upgrades is a project that has been on the plan, and we hope to complete it this year because we've had to roll it several years down the plan. The bathroom upgrades and renovations, this past summer we completed those at Dogwood and Farmington, not all bathrooms, but a lot, and they're such a big hit, we've added them to the plan for the next several years at each of our schools. So this year we hope to bid and do not all, but some of the bathrooms at Houston High, Houston Middle, and the older buildings, the main building and the K building at Riverdale. The security improvements at Houston Middle, when we do the addition, we're going to look to add a secure entrance there, similar to what we have at Farmington, or the new addition at Riverdale, or our new building at Forest Hill Elementary School. And Riverdale, after we did the boiler chiller project, is in desperate need of a paint job, so Riverdale's painting is on the list as well. The Houston High Band addition in Paddock, we are very close to going to bid on that. We are trying to get that out to bid next week. And I always like to tell the board and the public that if you're planning on completing a project in, say, December, which is when we need to break ground on this project, the prep, design, and approval process, you better give yourself 6 to 8 months to get through all of it in order to get there. We've received our approvals, so we are finalizing documents and getting out to bid. Once we do that, if we go out to bid next week, state law says we have to leave a bid out for a minimum of 10 business days. We usually like to give a few more days than that in order to give subcontractors and contractors time to bid the job properly, attend mandatory pre-bid meetings. And once we get through a bid package and do a bid tabulation, we try to have everything to the board five days prior to the meeting. So when we plan out our projects, those are the steps we have to go through, and we're going through that right now with the Houston High Band Addition in Paddock. The Houston High Auditorium renovation, Phase 1, is really going to focus on a lighting upgrade, and we're adding a bid alternate in there for a stage replacement or upgrade as well. So that's all stage lighting, all of the house lighting in the auditorium, and we're putting a bid alternate in for the stage to see where that comes in. The Houston High softball field, as we discussed in the work session, is really more of a placeholder number, and we're hopeful to do that work in the near future. Dogwood ceiling tile and grid replacement, we would love to be able to do that this year. All of our elementary schools, except for Dogwood, are at the point now where they have all new ceiling tile and grid and new LED lights. We've done that project at Farmington. We did it at Riverdale in the old building and the main building and the kindergarten building when we did the boiler chiller renovation project. And of course, when we built new at Forest Hill Elementary, that's what we put in. So if we are able to complete Dogwood this summer, that would bring all of our elementary schools up to a standard of having new ceiling tile and grid and a new LED lighting system. The Dogwood and Farmington portable removal is still on the plan. The only portables we have left are the ones that we brought in as a district, that they're the new portables that we're currently leasing. And then based on the feedback of the committee, and especially Ms. Landers, who was the board representative on the committee, the security improvements at Dogwood have been moved up to this fiscal year. Originally, they were in a later fiscal year. So those are the projects that we're hopeful to be able to complete in this fiscal year. And I won't go through all of the projects, but the rest of the slides here are the projects that are a need in the future. The only one that I will mention is actually not on this slide. It's on the next slide. Houston Middle HVAC replacement has been discussed. Feedback from our work order system and the operations department has suggested that we may need to move that up in the sequence. Those units are starting to fail. The parts are starting to get harder to get. They're not meeting energy management demands like they should, with set points and other issues which can lead to parent complaints as well as staff complaints. So that one is one that may need to move up in the sequence. And this is fiscal year 23 projects that we hope to complete in the future.
And I will clarify, and we say this when we talk to the public too, at the end of the day, it's the board's decision about the projects that we undertake. These are recommendations based on our different departments, years of service for HVAC units, but know that if the board decides that they want to postpone a project, add projects, that's always board's discretion on how we do. This is a proposed list for us that we try to go by. So as we say, if there's something that any of the board members feel like they'd like us to investigate or adjust, that's something that we can always take into consideration.
And this is our last year, fiscal year 24. And I always like to end this by saying this is not a Bible, it's just a guide. It changes every year, it will change again. It could change within this year based on our usage, based on our facility needs. This summer we had a $700,000 to $800,000 project at Houston High School that we weren't planning for due to flood damage. So none of this is set in stone, none of this is concrete. It is a guide that we operate by. And that concludes Mr. Manuel, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Cathy and Mr. Manuel. The next part of our meeting is the citizens to be heard. Ms. Subramani, have you received any additional? No. Okay, so I have received one citizen to be heard. By our policy, I read the citizens to be heard rules each time. GMSD, by its policy, allows persons to address the board during the citizens to be heard section of its agenda, but only within certain guidelines. Tennessee law makes no specific provisions for the participation of the public at school board meetings. Thus, there is no inherent or legal right of citizens to make comments during a school board meeting. Prior to making your remarks, you must state your name, address, and the subject of your presentation. The chair would remind you that if there are several persons who are intending to express the same sentiment, GMSD board rules require that you designate one spokesperson to speak for your position. If you do not do so and the chair determines that comments made are cumulative, the chair will direct the speaker to cease their remarks. Individuals addressing the board shall address their remarks to the chair. Speakers will not be permitted to engage in gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. In accordance with GMSD Policy SB 1.404, remarks will be limited to 3 minutes unless time is extended by the board or otherwise reduced by the chairman to reflect the number of citizens to be heard. TCA 39-17-306 provides that it is a Class B misdemeanor to intentionally prevent or disrupt a school board meeting. Please be advised that any individual who is disruptive or does not adhere to the aforementioned rules will not be permitted to continue or make their remarks at this meeting. This evening, one individual has indicated his desire to address the board. And so, Mr. Winsett, you have 3 minutes, and I'll begin after you state your name, your address, and the purpose of your presentation. Mr. Winsett, we cannot make defamatory comments about individuals. Again, we cannot make defamatory comments about individuals. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the items in the consent agenda?
I move to approve all the items in the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Ms. Subramani, would you call the roll?
Thank you. Ms. Landers?
Yes.
Ms. Griffith?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Chairman Luter?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have that we have no board action items. I've had that all the way through the work session. Therefore, I move to announcements. The items that we do want to let you know about. The first is that this will be our last meeting, we anticipate, in this space. Our new district office should be finished, and we will be moving in over fall break, October 14th through 18th, and that is located at 3350 South Forest Hill, Irene. And our next meeting will not take place on Monday, November 11th, because that is Veterans Day. It will take place on Tuesday, November 12th, at the new boardroom at the new district office. Again, 3350 South Forest Hill, Irene Road, Germantown, Tennessee, 38138, and boy, are we excited. There being no further business, we stand adjourned.